Hundreds of men, women and children were killed during a systematic campaign to expel Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, condemned as ethnic cleansing, a report has warned. The report published by Amnesty International on Wednesday comes after up to 15,000 Rohingya were stranded on the Myanmar-Bangladesh border over the weekend. The humanitarian organization has called for an arms embargo on Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, and criminal prosecution of the perpetrators. More than 580,000 refugees have arrived in Bangladesh since August 25, when Myanmar security forces began a scorchedearth crackdown against Rohingya villages. Up to 15,000 refugees fleeing from the humanitarian crisis in Myanmar Redux. Eyevine. Myanmar's government has said it was responding to attacks by Muslim insurgents, but the UN and others have said the response was disproportionate. The continuing flight of Rohingya Muslims has become a major humanitarian crisis and sparked international condemnation of Buddhistmajority Myanmar, which still denies atrocities are taking place. Based on interviews with more than 120 fleeing Rohingya, Amnesty International said at least hundreds of people were killed by security forces who surrounded villages, shot fleeing inhabitants and then set buildings alight, burning to death the elderly, sick and disabled who were unable to flee. In some villages, women and girls were raped or subjected to other sexual violence, according to the report. Stranded Rohingya were waiting for access to dry land in rice paddies near Palankali WTIH driving tropical rain coming at night. Redux. Eyevine. The witnesses repeatedly described a badge on their attackers' uniforms that matched one worn by troops from Myanmar's Western Command, Amnesty International said. When shown various insignia used by Myanmar's army, witnesses consistently picked out the Western Command patch, it said. The 33rd Light Infantry Division and Border Police, who wear a distinctive blue camouflage uniform, were also frequently involved in attacks on villages, along with Buddhist vigilante mobs. Witnesses said children and elderly people were among those in the mass exodus of Burma. Redux. Eyevine. Matthew Wells, an Amnesty crisis researcher who spent several weeks at the Bangladesh-Myanmar border, said hundreds of Rohingya have been treated for gunshot wounds and doctors say that the injuries are consistent with people being shot from behind as they fled. Several hundred people were said to have been killed in the 5 villages that Amnesty reported on. Given that dozens of villages across Rakhine State were targeted in a similar fashion, Mr. Wells said the death toll could be much higher. He said satellite imagery, corroborated by witness accounts, show that Rohingya homes and mosques have been burned entirely in villages, while non-Rohingya areas just 100 or 200 yards away were untouched. Satellite image from Human Rights Watch shows what they say is the complete destruction of a Rohingya village in close proximity to an intact Rakhine village, Mongdor Township, Myanmar. It speaks to how organized, how seemingly well-planned this scorched-earth campaign has been by the Myanmar military and how determined the effort has been to drive the Rohingya population out of the country, Mr. Wells said. Among almost 24 recommendations, the human rights group called for the UN Security Council to impose a comprehensive arms embargo on Myanmar and financial sanctions against senior officials responsible for violations that Amnesty says meet the criteria for crimes against humanity. Rohingya Muslims swim across river to escape violence in Burma. It said the council should explore options for bringing the perpetrators to justice under international law if Myanmar authorities do not act swiftly. Amnesty said it is time for the international community to move beyond public outcry and take action to end the campaign of violence that has driven more than half the Rohingya population out of Myanmar. A new wave of refugees started crossing the border over the weekend. Witnesses said that they were stopped by Bangladeshi border guards and spent the night in muddy rice fields. On August 25, a Rohingya insurgent group known as the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army attacked at least 30 security posts, causing dozens of casualties, according to Myanmar authorities. The brutal attacks against Rohingya that followed were described by the UN as textbook ethnic cleansing.